There's a hidden impulse within every woman, silent, powerful, and nearly impossible to contain. It's not just vanity, it's not neediness, and it's not a simple craving for attention. It's something deeper, more primal, something Carl Jung believed was engraved in the feminine psyche since the dawn of human consciousness. Have you ever wondered why certain behaviors repeat themselves, even when things have clearly gone too far? Why some decisions seem to come from a place even she can't fully explain? And why, despite all the experiences, the cycle always seems to start again? This video isn't about judgment. It's about revelation. We're going to explore what Jung saw, but few ever dared to say out loud. The instinct that quietly governs emotions, decisions, and even the body. If you thought you understood women, you might be about to discover the opposite. It begins quietly. Sometimes she doesn't even notice. A glance in the mirror, a thought that she should be seen, felt, noticed. Beneath the surface, something ancient awakens. The quiet urge to matter in the eyes of someone else. Not just for validation, but for existence. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche is always seeking meaning, and for many women that meaning becomes deeply entangled with being wanted. Not just liked, not simply admired, but longed for. It's not about arrogance, it's about identity. From a young age, she learns that attention equals worth, that a look from across the room can mean she's alive. The world teaches her that beauty brings power, and power means safety. Over time, this subtle message becomes a compass, one that doesn't always point north. But what happens when being seen becomes a need instead of a choice? This is where the trap forms. When attention fades, so does the sense of self. A woman might start changing how she speaks, how she walks, even how she thinks, all to be seen again. The instinct isn't malicious. It's survival. To disappear is to lose meaning. To be ignored is to feel erased. This isn't vanity. This is wiring. Some may call it insecurity, but Jung would say it's deeper than that. The feminine psyche seeks connection, and to connect, she must first be noticed. This is where the cycle begins. The more she is seen, the more she craves it. And the less she is, the more restless she becomes. Not for others, but to feel real again. And when that attention becomes tied to physicality, to desire, to the body, the consequences grow louder. She may chase that magnetic pull just to remember what it's like to be wanted, to feel seen through the fire in someone's eyes. But the more often she chases it, the more hollow it becomes. What once felt like connection now feels like repetition. Because being desired doesn't always mean being loved. This instinct, when unchecked, becomes a silent hunger. Not because she lacks worth, but because the world made her believe she must prove it over and over. Through stares, likes, touches, or names never remembered. What Jung reveals is not condemnation. It's clarity. The instinct to be desired is natural, but when it begins to define who she is, when it replaces her sense of self, it begins to consume her instead of serve her. And this is the moment of truth. When a woman starts to ask herself, would I still feel valuable if no one looked at me today? That question, quiet as it is, echoes louder than any compliment. If the answer hurts, it's not because she is weak. It's because the instinct has been pulling the strings for too long, and she hasn't even realized it. The instinct to be desired is not something to be shamed, but it must be understood, because when a woman learns to see herself without needing eyes on her, she becomes dangerous. She becomes whole. She no longer needs to perform, to adjust, to chase. She starts choosing instead of proving, and that is when desire returns on its own. Not as hunger, but as power, the silent search for emotional power. She might smile softly, say she's fine, pretend she doesn't care. But beneath those calm expressions, there's often a storm she herself doesn't fully understand. It's not rage. It's not control in the way people imagine. It's the quiet urge to feel something, and more importantly, to cause something. Carl Jung believed that the psyche holds within it the desire not only to experience emotions but to influence them in others. For many women, this becomes a silent instinct, one they rarely admit, but often express in ways that even they don't notice. She doesn't always want power in the traditional sense, not over money or status. What she deeply wants is emotional influence, the ability to be felt, remembered, missed, to leave a trace inside someone else that doesn't fade quickly. This isn't manipulation. It's an unconscious dance for significance. If someone feels deeply because of her, then in her mind, she matters. She exists. And so, small tests begin. Words chosen with care. Silence used with precision. Distance created not to push away but to pull. She watches how others react. She wants to know she still holds weight in someone's heart, that she can still cause movement without saying a word. When this works, it feels like oxygen. She breathes in the reaction, a message that says, you still matter, you still have power. But this cycle, when left unchecked, becomes dangerous. She may begin to confuse love with control, not because she is cruel, but because that emotional reaction becomes her measure of importance. If he begs, if he cries, if he suffers when she leaves, then she is real, then she is strong. But emotional power is not the same as emotional connection. What Jung teaches us is that every psyche contains a shadow, the hidden part we don't want to see. And sometimes, the search for emotional power becomes the shadow's voice. It's not love that speaks through her. It's fear. Fear of being nothing. Fear of being forgotten. This fear is old. It comes from a world that taught women they must be chosen to matter. That silence is only golden if someone comes to break it. That worth must be felt by someone else to be believed internally. So she pushes and pulls, not out of cruelty, but survival. The more he feels, the more she feels alive. But what happens when no one reacts? This is when the truth hurts the most. The lack of reaction feels like death, like vanishing. She might lash out, create conflict, or walk away, not because she's angry, but because she's scared of not leaving a mark. And yet the irony is this: the deeper her need to control emotions, the more disconnected she becomes from her own. She starts to feel empty. Her peace disappears, because constantly measuring her worth through the emotional reactions of others leaves her hollow, not whole. What Jung pointed to is this: true power doesn't come from being able to move others emotionally. True power comes from emotional independence, from being able to feel without needing a mirror to reflect back those feelings. When a woman begins to wake up from this pattern, it's painful. She may feel lost at first, as if she's invisible, as if she has no grip on anything anymore. But what she's really doing is reclaiming her energy, no longer leaking it through emotional games, no longer hunting reactions to feel valid. She begins to feel power in silence, not in waiting for someone to notice, but in noticing herself. The instinct to influence is still there. It will always live within her. But now it's transformed. No longer desperate, no longer reactive. It becomes sacred. She speaks not to control, but to connect. She pulls back not to test, but to rest. And when she finally feels that emotional power within, she stops needing to prove it outside. In that moment, she becomes unshakable. Not because she wins every emotional battle, but because she no longer needs to start one. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. The fear of being forgotten. There's a silence that frightens more than rejection. A space so empty, so quiet that it feels like you've been erased. Not hated, not missed. Just gone. And for many women, this is the fear that lingers beneath the surface. The fear that no one will remember them once they walk away. Carl Jung spoke of the human need for psychological significance, the deep desire to feel that we matter. And in women, this often transforms into a fear that if they're not constantly present in someone's thoughts, they cease to exist. It doesn't scream. It doesn't make a scene. This fear whispers. It says, "What if he moves on and never thinks of you again?" This fear doesn't always show itself in dramatic ways. Sometimes it hides behind little actions, checking if he watched her story, wondering if he noticed the change in her tone, hoping he still remembers the small details she once shared. It's not about obsession. It's about significance. She wants to know that she left a trace. Because being forgotten feels like being invisible, like none of it mattered, like she never mattered. And so many women begin to act from that place, not consciously but instinctively. They leave pieces behind like emotional fingerprints. A message left unanswered. A photo posted with just the right tone. A sudden silence after days of closeness. All in the hope that something will stay in his mind, that she will echo even in her absence. But here's the truth Jung would reveal. When your sense of value depends on being remembered, you've already given your power away. Because real worth isn't proven by someone else missing you. It's revealed by how you hold yourself when no one is watching. The fear of being forgotten can drive women into patterns that look like confidence but are rooted in insecurity. Overexposure, oversharing, overgiving, all as an unconscious attempt to leave a lasting impression. The irony? These very behaviors often push people away, and the fear ends up becoming a reality. Not because she wasn't worthy, but because she tried too hard to prove she was. What Jung understood is that this fear doesn't begin in adulthood. It begins in childhood. The little girl who learned that being quiet meant being overlooked. That love needed to be earned. That presence alone wasn't enough. And so she grew up believing that to avoid being forgotten, she had to perform. But here's the shift. The moment she stops fighting for memory, she starts creating true meaning. Being remembered is not about being louder. It's about being real. When a woman stands fully in her truth, when she no longer edits herself just to stay on someone's mind, that's when she becomes unforgettable. Not because she forces herself into their thoughts, but because she leaves an impression, not a performance. And still this fear will visit her from time to time. It's part of the human condition. The difference is how she responds. Does she act from it, or does she breathe through it? She begins to learn that her presence is not a marketing campaign. It's not a chase. It's not a scream in the dark. It's a quiet, grounded knowing that even if someone forgets her, she never forgets who she is. Because the fear of being forgotten only has power when she forgets herself first. And that's the core of what Jung would want us to understand. Every fear carries a lesson. This one teaches her to anchor into her own memory, to become so rooted in her own essence that no silence can shake her. Not being remembered by someone doesn't mean you're not remarkable. It simply means they couldn't hold what you brought. And that's not your burden to carry. You were not made to be someone's temporary thought. You were made to be your own permanent truth. The game of scarcity and reward. It's a game that begins without a name. No rules are written, no instructions are given. But somehow she knows how to play, even if she never means to. Give a little, then pull back, offer warmth, then go cold. Not out of cruelty, not even always on purpose, but because something deep inside tells her, don't give everything, not yet. Carl Jung spoke about the balance between the conscious and unconscious, and how much of what we do is driven not by logic, but by unseen patterns. This game of scarcity and reward is one of those patterns. It's not manipulation, it's survival. A strategy woven into the psyche, one that says, if I give too much, I'll be taken for granted. If I give too little, I'll be forgotten. So she dances between both. There's power in being desired, but even more power in being withheld. This is what she senses. That people value what they have to chase. That mystery creates meaning. So she gives just enough to spark interest, and then steps back to watch what he'll do with the space. And when he leans in, when he tries harder, when he asks what's wrong, she feels it. That quiet power, that emotional currency, it tells her, I still matter. I still have control. But over time, something changes. What once felt like connection starts to feel like calculation. She begins to feel exhausted, because in order to keep the game going, she must always stay one step ahead, always watching, planning, measuring, never fully resting, never fully giving, never fully being herself. And here's the irony. The more she plays the game, the less she feels seen for who she really is. She becomes the version of herself that knows how to be scarce, not the version that knows how to be safe. The reward she gives is real, her affection, her attention, her intimacy. But when these things are treated like tools for control instead of expressions of love, they lose their beauty. They become transactions. And when affection becomes currency, love becomes debt. Jung would point out that this is the moment when the shadow takes over, when the authentic self is buried beneath tactics, when connection is replaced by strategy. The deeper need, to be truly loved, is masked by a safer goal, to never lose power. But this power isn't real, because if someone only stays because you gave less, then they're not staying for you. They're staying for the chase. And when the chase ends, so does the attention. So what's the cost of playing this game? Emotional distance, loneliness, confusion. She might win the short-term reaction, the text back, the apology, the attention. But in the long term, she loses herself. Because every time she withholds, she reinforces the belief that her love isn't enough on its own, that it must be managed, hidden, rationed. And when she finally wants to be fully seen, she doesn't know how. Jung teaches that individuation, becoming whole, requires honesty, not just with others, but with ourselves. And this game, as seductive as it is built on fear. Fear of being too much, fear of not being enough, fear of being abandoned the moment she's fully open. But what if she let go? What if she stopped playing? She might lose the instant reactions, the little victories, the illusion of control. But she would gain something far more powerful: peace, freedom, authenticity. A love that stays not because it's managed, but because it's mutual. And most of all, she would remember what it feels like to give without keeping score, to care without calculating, to be without pretending. Because true connection doesn't come from withholding. It comes from wholeness. The game of scarcity and reward will always be tempting. It feels safe. It feels smart. But in the end, it builds walls instead of bridges. And no matter how strong those walls are, they can't protect her from the truth. She was always enough without needing to be hard to get. The need to make an impact. She walks into a room and doesn't want to disappear. She speaks and hopes her words echo. She connects and silently asks, "Will you carry a piece of me after I'm gone?" This is not about attention. It's about presence. Not just being seen, but felt. Carl Jung understood that the ego craves significance, but the soul craves meaning. Many women are driven by a quiet instinct to matter, to make an impact that lasts beyond the moment. It's not always loud. Often it's hidden behind small gestures, subtle actions, unspoken expectations. But deep inside there's a yearning to be unforgettable. She wants to know that something shifted in the other person after she arrived, that her existence left a mark, that her energy wasn't just passing through. It altered something. This instinct becomes even stronger when she feels overlooked. The less she feels seen, the more she tries to leave proof of her presence. Through words that cut deep, through beauty that lingers, through absence that hurts. It's not manipulation, it's memory making. If she can't stay physically, she wants to stay psychologically. But here's where the line blurs. When her identity becomes tied to the effect she has on others, she loses connection with her true self. She starts chasing impact instead of authenticity. She edits her truth, not because it's wrong, but because she fears it won't be memorable enough. Over time, this becomes exhausting. She becomes so focused on being unforgettable that she forgets to simply be. Jung would point to the archetype of the performer, the part of the psyche that crafts roles to earn approval or admiration. It doesn't lie. It doesn't deceive. But it adapts. It says, "Be whatever they'll remember." And so she becomes everything except herself. The tragedy is that the impact she's chasing is often already there. Her presence does change people. Her silence is felt. Her kindness does leave echoes. But because she doesn't feel it immediately, she doubts it ever happened. This is where healing begins, when she no longer needs to be remembered to feel real. When she learns to trust that she makes an impact just by being present, that her value is not measured by the aftershocks, but by the integrity of her presence. She doesn't have to craft a legacy in every interaction. She doesn't have to shake the ground to be worth the air she breathes. The deepest impact often happens quietly, without performance, without force, without effort. It's in the way she listens, in the way she walks away with dignity, in the way she holds herself without trying to impress. That kind of presence leaves a permanent mark. And once she realizes this, the need to be unforgettable fades. Not because she gives up, but because she no longer doubts that she already is. The attraction to those who don't surrender. She could have someone who gives her the world. Someone who says yes, who shows up, who opens up without resistance. But there's something inside her that pulls in another direction, toward the one who doesn't fully give in, the one who stays half-closed, the one who never quite says everything. Carl Jung would say this is not confusion, it's projection. When a woman feels incomplete within herself, she's often drawn to those who reflect her own emotional gaps. She doesn't chase the unavailable because she enjoys the pain. She chases it because it mirrors something in her, something unclaimed, something unresolved. The person who doesn't surrender activates the instinct to prove herself, to break the wall, to matter enough that they finally let go. It's not love, it's conquest disguised as connection. She tells herself that when he finally opens up, it will mean something more, that it will prove her worth. that it will fix the story. But here's what Jung would ask. Why are you attracted to the one who resists your love? It's not about them. It's about what they represent. The part of her that's afraid to fully open. The part that doesn't feel safe being loved without effort. The part that believes love must be earned, not received. This attraction is not weakness. It's a signal, a message from the unconscious. It says, there's a part of you that still doesn't trust peace, because peace feels boring. Surrender feels suspicious. And when someone gives too easily, she wonders, what's wrong with them? But the truth is painful. It's not that something is wrong with them. It's that something still feels unhealed within her. Jung would call this a reflection of the anima, the inner feminine voice that carries deep emotional wisdom. When this voice is unheard, the woman keeps chasing tension instead of tenderness, fire instead of foundation. She mistakes the emotional roller coaster for depth, the push and pull for passion, the mystery for meaning. But here's the shift. Once she begins to heal, the attraction to resistance fades. She no longer needs to prove her worth. She no longer wants to beg for breadcrumbs. She starts craving something softer, something safer, something honest. She begins to understand. The one who doesn't surrender isn't mysterious. He's just not ready. And she's no longer interested in waiting for someone to grow. She's growing now toward peace, toward openness, toward a love that doesn't hurt to hold. The instinct to test the limits. There's a moment, quiet but powerful, when she pushes just to see what will happen. A sharp word, a cold silence, a sudden withdrawal. Not because she wants to destroy, but because she needs to know. Will you stay even now? Carl Jung believed that much of human behavior is rooted in unconscious testing. We test the world to see where we stand. We test people to see if they'll break. And for many women, this instinct becomes a way to measure safety, not through calm, but through reaction. She doesn't always know she's doing it. It might feel like a sudden mood swing, a cold stare, a passive comment with hidden weight. But underneath, she's watching, waiting, asking silently, how much can you take before you leave? It's not cruelty, it's fear wearing armor. The deeper the connection, the stronger the test, because the stakes are higher. The more she feels, the more afraid she becomes of losing it. So she pushes, to see if the love is real, to see if it's strong enough to hold. But here's the irony Jung would point out. The very act of testing often weakens the bond. What begins as a search for reassurance becomes a reason for rupture. The person being tested grows tired, confused, unsure what's real and what's a game. She doesn't want to be left, but the test itself becomes the trigger for the loss she feared. This cycle repeats until she realizes that love cannot survive under constant pressure, that loyalty cannot be proven through pain, that presence cannot be maintained through punishment. The instinct to test comes from a wound, usually one that formed early, a time when love was unpredictable, when promises were broken, when care was inconsistent. And so she learned to test people before trusting them. Jung would say this is the shadow at work, the unhealed part of the psyche trying to protect the heart, even if it means hurting others in the process. But healing doesn't mean she stops feeling fear. It means she stops feeding it. She learns to ask openly instead of provoking silently. She learns to trust without setting traps. She learns to allow closeness without burning it, to see if it returns. And most of all, she learns to trust herself. Because often the testing isn't really about the other person. It's about whether she believes she's worthy of love that stays. When this instinct is brought to light, it loses its grip. She sees it for what it is, a scared part of her that needs comfort, not control. A voice that says, "I've been hurt before. Please don't do it again." And instead of pushing someone away to see if they'll come back, she learns to stay present and see who remains without being provoked. That's the real test. And it reveals everything. The pain that turns into attraction. Some women don't chase joy. They chase the ache, the confusion, the uncertainty. Not because they want to suffer, but because somewhere along the way, pain became familiar. And what's familiar often feels like love. Carl Jung spoke of repetition compulsion, the unconscious pull to recreate emotional patterns from the past. When a woman has associated love with pain, distance, or rejection, she doesn't just accept it, she seeks it. Not because she enjoys it, but because it feels like home. She might say, "I don't know why I always fall for the wrong ones." But deep down, something in her is searching for something lost, a broken bond, an unfinished story, a wound that never fully closed. And so pain becomes a compass. If he makes her feel anxious, she thinks it must be real. If he confuses her, she believes he must care. If he hurts her, she tells herself, "This is what passion feels like." But this isn't passion. It's programming. She's not chasing him. She's chasing a version of herself that she abandoned when she first felt unworthy. She thinks if she can win someone who doesn't treat her right, maybe she'll finally prove that she was always enough. But Jung would warn, the shadow doesn't heal through repetition. It heals through awareness. The attraction to pain is not love. It's memory. The body remembers the heartbreak. The mind remembers the chaos. The soul remembers the hunger for resolution. So when someone stirs those old feelings, it feels powerful, but also dangerous. She might say she wants peace, but when peace shows up, she rejects it. It feels fake, too easy. She thinks, this can't be real. Love isn't supposed to be this calm. But love is supposed to be calm, respectful, software kind. It's the chaos that's not normal. It's just familiar. This is where the transformation begins. When she starts to see peace not as boring, but as safe. When she learns to feel excitement in kindness. When she teaches her nervous system that attention doesn't have to hurt. That love doesn't have to leave bruises. It takes time. And it hurts. Because walking away from pain means grieving the version of herself who thought she needed it. But one day, the ache no longer attracts her. The distance no longer pulls her in. The confusion no longer makes her feel alive. Because now, she's alive on her own. Whole, grounded, clear. She doesn't need pain to feel deep anymore. She's found depth in her healing. The hunger that never feeds. There's a kind of hunger that looks like desire, but never truly satisfies. A need that keeps returning no matter how many times it's fed. She gets the message, the kiss, the night, the approval. And yet, after the thrill fades, she feels it. The same emptiness rising again. Carl Jung called this the illusion of fulfillment. When we mistake temporary stimulation for lasting meaning, many women, without even realizing it, fall into this trap. They chase the next hit of validation, the next proof of their worth, thinking this time it will be enough. But it never is. Because this hunger isn't physical. It's not even emotional. It's spiritual. It comes from a part of the self that has been silenced for too long. The part that wants to be seen not just for how she looks or what she gives, but for who she is. And no amount of outside attention can feed what the inner world is starving for. So she keeps searching. One more message, one more compliment, one more body, And every time the cycle repeats: satisfaction, then silence, pleasure, then emptiness, presence, then absence. It begins to feel like addiction, not to people, but to being wanted. The moment of being chosen lights her up, but it fades fast. And when it does, the hunger returns, sharper than before. Jung would say this is the result of living disconnected from the self, the true center of the psyche. When a woman hasn't met that part of her, she seeks identity through reaction, through attention, through the eyes of others. She becomes full of moments, but empty of meaning. And here lies the tragedy. The world keeps telling her to chase more, be more beautiful, be more wanted, be more desired. But no one tells her the truth. You don't need to be more. You need to go deeper. Because until she meets herself, truly fully, she will keep asking others to feed what only she can nourish. The hunger grows louder with time. It starts affecting how she sees everything. No gesture feels big enough. No connection feels deep enough. Even genuine love feels suspicious because it doesn't match the craving. And so, she doubts it, destroys it, or leaves it, chasing a stronger hit. But that hit never comes, because the hunger was never about others. It was about a lost relationship with her own soul. This is the final truth Jung invites her to see. The part of her that's starving isn't broken, it's just been ignored, buried beneath performance, people-pleasing, and proving. And it's waiting, patiently, for her to come home. When she does, something shifts. She starts feeling full in moments that used to feel empty. A quiet evening alone, a walk with no makeup, a message she doesn't respond to, not out of strategy, but because she simply doesn't need it anymore. The hunger fades. Not because it disappears, but because it's finally being fed by what is real. She no longer chases intensity. She creates intimacy. She no longer needs to be consumed, because she's no longer consuming herself to be loved. She rests. And in that rest, she becomes powerful. No longer starving. No longer hollow. No longer waiting to be chosen. She chooses herself. And that is the one thing the hunger could never offer. What if the instinct you thought made you powerful was actually the one keeping you trapped? What if the hunger, the need, the chase weren't signs of strength, but symptoms of a deeper disconnection from your true self? Before you look for another answer in someone else's eyes, ask yourself the question no one dares to ask. Who are you when no one is watching? Because until that woman is known, nothing and no one will ever be enough.